How are you doing?
Okay, good, 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 good. Good. Little sleepy today, but not too bad otherwise.
Yeah. I'm not sure where everyone else is, but normally Guido at least is here.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully he's doing
Guido.
okay. Um, how are you doing? How was the inner work going?
It's good. It's good. Been doing. I've been still doing the 60 bones. I've been doing I guess the 12 joints when I go walking. And I've been noticing sort of I don't know, physical or energetic reaction when I put my attention on either specific bones or joints or something, especially the toe bones. They'll start twitching, kind of like that or
Yeah.
that. um, so
Do the
that's really
appropriate
interesting for me.
does the appropriate
Yeah.
one twitch? That's really interesting.
Or at least
Um,
that seems to be the center of it. You know.
yeah. How else are you finding it? So when you're walking, how are you finding it? Uh, which ones do you do? Do you do the sources of divine rejoicings, revolts, and sufferings when you're walking?
I do the holy affirming.
Holy affirming. Do
Just
you do it so with the joints? So holy, affirming, holy, denying. Okay. Do you prefer that one over the sources, or that's just the way you do it?
um it's mostly the way I do it. The holy affirming, I definitely have that one memorized.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, the
They're
words are
only
there.
12 words each. I,
Yeah.
I know I must admit that it took me, I had to really focus on memorizing the sources. The person in my real life group, who was the student of Paul Beidler, um, used that one. She said we could do the alternate because the Holy Affirming also has 12 words. But the one that she focused on and that she said Beidler taught her to focus on was the sources of divine rejoicings, revolts, and sufferings. Direct your actions upon us. Um,
Actions.
yeah. How else
Okay.
is it going?
Oh, maybe I'll switch it up.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been continuing with the breathing, with the I am and the holding the energy in, breathing out the smoke. Um. And that has a pretty quick reaction in my system as well. I
Yeah.
feel brighter. I feel kind of, and it doesn't seem to stick around too long, but like the initial kind of rush of it doesn't. But I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
say it. It
What,
seems to be kind of,
can you explain by what you mean by brighter? Um,
um,
I mean, I would use the same word. I've used it to people that it's like I'm in this, not a fog, but it's like I'm in this, things are illuminated more. The atmosphere around me seems more illuminated. And that's not even a proper way to describe it. It's just like, and it does dissipate after a couple of minutes. So I've done
mhm.
when I lead groups, I can't do it. But a couple of times I've recorded it and I've played it for my group, so I've done it with them at the same time. And does anyone else feel this? And no one else notices that sense of sort of illumination around us. Is that a similar experience to you? It's like things.
Is it? Yeah, I would say somewhat. I'm trying to dial it in a little bit more. Um, I think one thing that I notice is it's like the interior of my body, whatever it is that I'm looking at it with, that seems brighter. Like I can see more easily.
Okay.
Um, and then there's also kind of an accompanying, like somebody turned up I don't know, like a Photoshop filter. You turn, you slide up the brightness, everything gets a little shinier. Like that seems to a corresponding kind of effect seems to happen around me in the space that I'm in, whatever I'm here usually.
And how long does it last?
Usually just a few minutes. Although there are sort of lingering after effects. You know, the ease of attuning to my body or attending to my body. It doesn't ever like it'll pop up kind of during the day. Things will be a little brighter inside, a little easier to see. Tension or sort of the space from the front to the back opens up a little bit. What else?
Yeah, I have a friend that I've known for quite a few years who's in my my sort of live group. He said that he's noticed that it's added a quality to his inner perceptions. He also belongs to a Sufi group that focuses on a heart meditation. And so what he says is in the morning when he sits down to do his practice, he does the breathing. And then he would go to the Sufi heart, opening the heart meditation. And he's discovered that he has to just sit there for 5, maybe even 10 minutes before he goes on to the Sufi practice, because he really feels that there's something that needs to settle within him. So he does the breathing first, and then he just sits there sort of in a stillness before he begins doing his next practice. And have you noticed anything like that?
Well, I've noticed that my I do it the other way. I have just a sitting practice. It's pretty basic. Sit, make sure the posture's comfortable and aligned, and then just try not to get lost in thought. Try not to do anything really. And I'll do that for 45 minutes, and then at the end of that, I'll do breathing exercise. And I've noticed that since I've taken up the breathing exercise, the sitting for the most part has been a lot more still. I feel more kind of rooted, a little more like anchored, not quite so thrown around. The thoughts are easier to notice and kind of not get caught in. And then we'll do that, and then I'll do the breathing, and it is a case of there's some kind of process going on afterwards that I can just ignore and get up and go about my day and lose track of, or I can kind of, if I keep my attention on the body or just feeling what's going on, that it does maintain the sort of lighter feeling and the brighter quality for a little bit, and then usually then I do have to get up and go do something. But it'd be interesting to see if I just sat in that.
Yeah.
How long it would last.
I mean, if you go back to the schema, let me just pull it up. I know quite a few people are starting to watch this now. I've got people who've been commenting on it from Egypt and Japan and various places. So, and they're asking me to send them the diagrams and things like that. So let me just pull it up. On this diagram, if we understand Mr. Gurdjieff's terminology as well, number 1 is the absolute, unknowable. Number 3, in a different schema, a different cosmology, he has called, let me pull that other diagram up. I've got another diagram that will show this even better, but it's just a matter of me quickly being able to put my finger on it. This has got the Portuguese on the left, the English on the right. Um, so number 1 is the absolute. Number 3 is all worlds. So number 3 would be the entire universe and everything contained within the universe. Number 6 is all suns. So that's all stars in the entire starry realm, every point of star light in the universe. Number 12 is our sun, and this is our particular ray of creation. Mr. Gurdjieff says that there are other rays of creation, but this is our particular one. So our sun, and our planets, so our solar system, our Earth, and our moon. And let me go back to the other diagram to explain this then slightly. So when he was talking about the diagram of everything living, he used the absolute, the unchanging, archangels, angels, man, that I've got listed on the left-hand column. But if we plug in those other words, you know, the absolute, then all worlds, in other words, the entire universe, then all suns. So the archangels would be on the level of all suns. The angels would be on the level of our sun. And then, you know, man would be on the planetary realm. And man is kind of devolved from what we should be. And then the vertebrates are on the earthly realm. But if we go over to the right side, and this, after the second conscious shock, stepping up into the state of objective consciousness, our center of gravity, and Mr. Gurdjieff used the phrase, the center of gravity of our psychic life. So for man number 1, 2, and 3, you know, the man who's ruled by the instinctual part of his being, or the emotional or the intellectual, lopsided man, their center of gravity is world 48, the earth. The man who is becoming balanced, his center of gravity is world 24, or the planetary realm. And man number 5 is ruled by the solar realm, the sun. So on the equivalent, the center of gravity is hydrogen 12, which is the solar realm. I'm going to stop sharing this. So as you begin to move up, and these are not distinct, discrete categories. These are continuums. So you can have a low 4, a middle 4, a high 4, a low 5. The difference between a low 4 and a high 5, or a high 4 and a low 5, is, you know, it depends where a person is in that moment. But it means as we move up towards that state of objective consciousness, as we develop that real I, as we develop individuality, as we develop a certain permanence within ourselves, we actually rise up to the level where we become solar beings. So there is a connection with luminosity, with enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't the 16th century term of the West. That was just the mind, and them developing the mind and using reason and critical thinking to begin to look at, you know, what could we understand, and you know, it led to the rise of science and the sort of the fall of the church, so to speak, because of the mind. But there is actually a level of enlightenment, a true enlightenment, that comes as we move up. And Mr. Gurdjieff said that, you know, we rise up and we rise down throughout the day. And so I find it interesting, the degree of illumination, just noticing that your relationship to light is beginning to change ever so slightly. Have you had other experiences with light changing?
Yeah, like it's pretty new.
Yeah.
And not, you know, previous to coming to the work, not really much in that regard either.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Gurdjieff, actually, there's a quote, I won't pull it up because I won't be able to find it quickly. He says that we you know, the first little tiny awakening, and then another tiny awakening, and another, and you have to awaken thousands of times before it starts to become permanent. And so there are all these, you know, not all of these, but there are various spiritual leaders. One I can think of who finally admitted that he ended up creating a cult was a New Yorker by the name of Andrew Cohen. Enlighten Next and various different things. And he went to India. He had one experience and he considered himself enlightened after having that one briefest of taste of enlightenment. And then he came back and he messed up a lot of people through the belief that he was then an enlightened being because he tasted it once. Mr. Gurdjieff said we have to taste it 1,000 times or more than 1,000 times before it begins to become permanent. But you know what you're describing there, to me, it seems like in those moments, perhaps it's because you're doing the 45 minutes of sitting and doing that practice, and then you do the breathing exercise, that in that moment you are moving up to that level. And the other thing is, I don't want to talk about this too much because I'm a hypnotherapist, and I know people can be hypnotically induced to believe they can access these higher states. And that's why it's actually best not to really talk too deeply about them, or all these people you know, who are psychologically unbalanced are going to think that they've done this because they hypnotize themselves into believing that they do it. And so this is one of the reasons why, you know, we don't like to talk, and not just, you know, you know, don't like to talk about the attributes of that level so much, because people can begin to imagine themselves into it. But for someone like you, I find it very interesting. All the inner work that you've done, all the Buddhist silent retreats that you've done, all of the various things that have gone on within you. It doesn't surprise me that you can begin to taste this to a degree. And it starts out really small at the first, and it takes years and years of experiencing it before it grows and before it becomes permanent, but your relationship with light changes. But as I said, I don't really want to talk about that too much. There's Guido. Guido, how are you?
Guido?
Hello?
Yeah. I think maybe when we connect that there's this kind of muffled vocals.
Kind of regular. I was sleeping. I was sleeping. I had a very hard pain.
Okay.
Some information. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You had a heart pain. How are you feeling right now? Yes, we can hear you.
Can you? I was sleeping. I saw the time I came. I rushed to connect me.
Yeah.
To connect you. Where is everybody? Where is I am?
Can't you see Ian? He's right here.
Hey, Guido, I'm here.
Hi, why
You haven't loaded on your screen yet or something.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You know, I want to try an experiment today. Now that you're here, Guido, I'm going to try and see. I'm curious to see whether or not we can hear this. I've been working on the 60 bone exercise as a 5-minute, doing it 3 times. I've been, you know, Googling Zoom US, the software that we're using, to see how I can play a video. And I'm going to see if I can play it now. I think it's about 5 minutes. We go through the 60 bones 3 times, and hopefully, well, I'll start it, and whoops. Let me just go slip into this.
Holy denying.
Can everyone hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Holy reconciling.
So you can hear the Holy Reconciling?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, maybe it's before I couldn't do it. Maybe it was because I was using my high definition microphone. So I'm going to do the wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being. This is one of Mr. Gurdjieff's prayers. The wholly affirming is the positive, the wholly denying is the negative, the wholly reconciling is the equalizing. These are the three forces, the law of three, the Trinity, the pattern of the universe that becomes the blueprint for creation. We have a head brain, a body brain, and a feeling brain. Our head brain represents the wholly affirming, our body brain, the wholly denying, our feeling brain, the wholly reconciling. Within language, our sentences have a subject, which is the affirming. They have an object, which is the denying, and they have a verb, which is the reconciling. So this is found throughout creation, but at the highest level, it's the wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling. And this can also be represented as the wholly affirming would be God the Father, and within conventional Christianity, the wholly denying would be the Holy Ghost, and the wholly reconciling would be, Jesus, the Son. I like to think of the wholly affirming as God the Father, the wholly denying as God the Mother or God the Feminine, and the wholly reconciling as God the Child. That's my own personal take on it. So this is a profound prayer. And this is one way to say the prayer within ourselves. And hopefully we get sound, and I might be able to make commentary. I'll read the first bit. So this is the 60 bone exercise. And if you've noticed, we've got 3 bones. The top bit is the phalange, but this is a bone, this is a bone, and this is a bone. So write down into it and become aware of all of these bones and repeat a line of the wholly affirming prayer.
Wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being.
Okay, we did it 3 times to become aware of the 3 bones. Let's move into J.G. Bennett's 60-point exercise. So this is also done in conjunction with our breathing. So we want to breathe in awareness into various points in our body and then breathe out tension. And we start with the top of our head, the crown of our head, breathing in awareness. So sensing that part of our body and then breathing out tension. And breathing in awareness and breathing out tension, the right side of our forehead, our right eye, the right side of our nose and face, our right ear and the finer muscles in the right side of our head, the right side of our mouth and jaw, the right side of our throat and neck, our right shoulder, our right upper arm, our right elbow, our right lower arm, our right wrist, the top of our right hand, our right thumb, our right index finger, our right middle finger, our right fourth finger, our right baby finger, our right palm. Breathing in awareness and breathing out tension to the right side of our chest. The right side of our midriff and solar plexus. The right side of our lower abdomen and pelvis. Our right shoulder blade and the right side of our upper back. The right side of our middle back. The right side of our lower back. Our right hip and buttock. Our upper right leg. Our right knee. Our right lower leg. Our right ankle. The top of our right foot. Our right big toe. Our right second toe. Our right middle toe. Our right fourth toe. Our right baby toe. The bottom of our right foot, including our heel. And now reversing this process and breathing in awareness and breathing out tension to the bottom of our left foot and heel. Our left baby toe. Our left fourth toe. Our left middle toe. Our left second toe. Our left big toe. The top of our left foot. Our left ankle. Our left lower leg. Our left knee. Our left upper leg. Our left hip and buttock. Our left lower back. the left side of our middle back, the left side of our upper back and left shoulder blade, our left palm, our left baby finger, our left fourth finger, our left middle finger, our left index finger, our left thumb, the top of our left hand, our left wrist, our left lower arm, our left elbow, our left upper arm, our left shoulder, the left side of our neck and throat, the left side of our jaw and mouth, our left ear and the finer muscles in the left side of our head, the left side of our face and nose, our left eye, the left side of our forehead, and then bringing our attention to the top of our head. And just allow your attention to rest for a few moments. This is something that I've added to this exercise. It's just a slight modification. But as you breathe in, pull your awareness up the left side of your body, and as you breathe out, breathe your awareness down the right side of your body. Breathing in your awareness up the left side of your body and breathing out your awareness down the right side of your body. And do this just for a couple of breaths. Breathing up the left side of your body and then breathing down the right side of your body. Breathing up the left and then breathing down the right. And then just allow your attention to rest. And let me see if I can get fancy again. Just give me a moment. Maybe I won't be able to. I'm in the wrong place. Just keep your attention on your body. Keep your attention on yourself. And just focus on your breath. Focus on your breathing. Aware of your body. Aware of your breathing. And then I'll see if I can, whoops, sorry, here it is. I'll have to narrate this one because I don't have text, and I'm gonna record text to go along with all of this. So the collected state. an inner exercise by George Gurdjieff. And it comes from transcripts of Gurdjieff's meetings 1941 to 1946.
You represent to yourself that you are surrounded by an atmosphere. Like the earth, you also have an atmosphere, which surrounds you on all sides for a meter more or less. In the atmosphere, the associations, the thoughts produce waves. It concentrates at certain places, it recedes. It has movements according to the direction which you impart to it. This depends on the movement of your thought. Your atmosphere is displaced in the direction in which your thought goes. If you think of your mother, who is far away, your atmosphere moves towards the place where your mother is. When you do this exercise, you represent to yourself that this atmosphere has limits. For example, 1.5 meters, shall we say? Then you concentrate all your attention on preventing your atmosphere from escaping beyond the limit. You do not allow it to go further than 1 meter or 1.5 meters. When you feel your atmosphere quietened, without waves, without movement, then with all your will, you suck it into yourself. You conserve yourself in this atmosphere. You draw it consciously into yourself. The more you can, the better it is. To start with, it is very tiring.
So those were Mr. Gurdjieff's words. So surround ourselves with an atmosphere. Still, calm, and then on the count of 3, suck it into ourselves. 1, 2, 3. And then let's just finish by silently repeating in our mind, may results from this exercise be transubstantiated within me for my being. And as I've said before, the right philosophy and the wrong inner exercises will get you nowhere. It's better to have the right inner exercises and the wrong philosophy. Though it's better to have the right philosophy and the right inner exercises, which I believe comes from this teaching. But if you just read the words, if you just focus on the books and on the teachings, and you do not do inner exercises, you do not practice on a daily basis, you will not get anywhere. And this is the part that's always been hidden, that has been talked about in the oral traditions, that you have to go and join a lineage group and they keep the secret. And there are so many people out there who have got the teachings, they understand the teachings, but they don't have any idea of what the inner exercises are about. And that's one of the purposes for what I'm doing. I want to release a lot of these inner exercises to the world, to the people who are interested in these teachings, so that they can grow their being. Every time we focus our attention on something, we leave an impression behind. We leave some kind of physical trace behind inside ourselves. We know this as memories, but memories are actually physically contained within us. There's a substance that is encoded with the memory. And we can have memories of World 48, of the mechanical habitual level of awareness that most people spend most of their lives in. And so they have very mechanical memories. And if they learn something by rote through repetition, it builds up this substance inside themselves, so it makes it easier to access. But we can also have a higher order memory We can have memories of things that occur in the mindful state, in the planetary realm, world 24. So whenever we bring our attention to our body, whenever we become mindful, we are leaving behind these infinitesimal traces of something inside ourselves. And over time, these infinitesimal traces build up. And so doing an inner exercise once will be like pouring from the empty to the void, using Mr. Gurdjieff's wonderful expression. Doing it twice will do nothing. 100 times, 1,000 times, perhaps 100,000 times, something will happen. And I once saw, I think it was in Kathleen Spieth's book on the Gurdjieff teachings, I forget the name, where she talked about how that in certain Tibetan monasteries, in order to be admitted to the monastery, you had to say a mantra 100,000 times. When you say it 100,000 times, you are building up some kind of substance, some kind of resonance, some kind of thing inside you at a higher level if you do it with the mindful awareness than you will if you do it in the mindless state. And this is the power of attention. And, you know, Mr. Gurdjieff said one of the most miraculous gifts that we have is the power of attention. And you can never regain a moment of lost attention. I've mentioned this before, you know, we share 97% of our DNA with chimpanzees. And you can't tell a chimpanzee, focus your attention on your right thumb. You can tap a chimpanzee's right thumb and the chimpanzee will become aware of it. But what differentiates us from the lower order animals, from the animals and the mammals, and is our ability to consciously use the power of our attention. And all these inner exercises, everything in terms of the inner work is really a harnessing of the power of attention and focusing our attention on growing these higher order memories, these higher order crystallizations within us, because a memory is something that's crystallized within us and taken some kind of form and substance. And Mr. Gurdjieff talks about growing higher being bodies within ourselves. It's like our physical body is really a womb that we can then grow and develop these other bodies within. The analogy I've talked about before is like we are born with the full completion of the physical body. And our emotional body, our astral body, our Kesjan body is born half developed. It's like a 28-week fetus that's not really viable if the physical body died. It has to be nurtured and grown. And then our higher being body is like an embryo, and it also has to be cultivated and grown. So we do this growth through the inner exercises. But the teachings are also very important because they provide a map, a framework that gives us some indication of where we are going. Now, this leads into the topic I wanted to talk about today, identification. Identification is the wrong focus of our attention. And I'm going to pull up the major passage, that where Mr. Gurdjieff talks about identification. If I can find it, I don't know why it's not showing. Show all windows. I'll start with this one. Mr. Gurdjieff said, remember yourself always and everywhere. And to remember myself is to be aware of myself, to be aware of the sensation of myself, to be aware that I exist here, in my body, in this moment, in this environment. So for me, it's in this particular room, sitting in front of my laptop, with my dog down on the ground and, you know, the various different things around me. Remember myself always and everywhere. Let me just exit for, I'm just, okay. And let me pull this quote up. A man does not remember what he has thought or what he has said, and he does not remember how he thought or how he spoke. This, in its turn, is connected with one of the fundamental characteristics of man's attitude towards himself and to all of his surroundings, namely, his constant identification with what at a given moment has attracted his attention, his thoughts, or his desires and imagination. So we walk around in a state of identification, and our attention, the most miraculous gift that we have been given, is pulled this way and that way, and we are not focusing on it in this moment. Identification is, and this is from In Search of the Miraculous, and it's Peter Uspensky quoting Mr. Gurdjieff. Identification is so common a quality that for purposes of observation, it is difficult to separate it from everything else. Man is always in a state of identification. Only the object of identification changes. So think about this. Wherever we focus our attention, in that moment, we are focused and identified with the object of our attention. And so in a sense, our attention is focused on something that is not us, that is not here. We do not remember ourselves. We do not have our attention focused on ourselves in this environment. So we are always in a state of identification. Only the object of identification changes. A man identifies with a small problem which confronts him, and he completely forgets the great aims with which he began his work. He identifies with one thought and forgets other thoughts. He is identified with one feeling, with one mood, and forgets his own wider thoughts, emotions, and moods. In work on themselves, people are so much identified with separate aims that they fail to see the wood for the trees. 2 or 3 trees nearest to them represent for them the whole wood. And I'm going to make an aside here. For those of you who have read Life is Real Only Then When I Am, he talks about how in England they were obsessed with self-remembering, and in America they were obsessed with self-observation, and that different groups around the world had tended to become very distorted by focusing on just one small part of the work. So here he's talking about how 2 or 3 trees nearest to them represent to them the whole wood or the whole work. So we can become identified with parts of the work. Identifying is one of our most terrible foes because it penetrates everywhere and deceives a man at the moment when it seems to him that he is struggling with it. It is especially difficult to free oneself from identifying because a man naturally becomes more easily identified with the things that interest him most, to that which he gives his time, his work, and his attention. In order to free himself from identifying, a man must be constantly on guard and be merciless with himself. That is, he must not be afraid of seeing all of the subtle and hidden forms which identifying takes. It is necessary to see and to study identifying to its very roots in oneself. The difficulty in struggling with identifying is still further increased by the fact that when people observe it in themselves, They consider it a very good trait. They call it enthusiasm, zeal, passion, spontaneity, inspiration, and names of that kind. And they consider that only in a state of identifying can a man really produce good work, no matter in what sphere. In reality, of course, this is an illusion. Man cannot do anything sensible when he is in a state of identifying. If people could see what the state of identifying means, they would alter their opinion. A man becomes a thing, a piece of flesh. He loses even the small semblance of a human being that he has. In the East, where people smoke hashish and other drugs, it often happens that a man becomes so identified with his pipe that he begins to consider he is a pipe himself. This is not a joke, but a fact. He actually becomes a pipe. This is identifying. And for this, hashish or opium are entirely unnecessary. Look at people in shops, in theaters, in restaurants, or see how they identify with words when they argue about something or try to prove something, particularly something they do not know themselves. They become greediness, desires, or words of themselves. Nothing remains. Identifying is the chief obstacle to self-remembering. A man who identifies with anything is unable to remember himself. In order to remember himself, it is necessary, first of all, not to identify. But in order to learn not to identify, man must first of all not be identified with himself, must not call himself I and always and on all occasions. He must remember that there are two in him, that there is himself, that is I in him, and that there is another with whom he must struggle, with whom he must conquer, if he wishes at any time to attain anything. So long as a man identifies or can be identified, he is the slave to everything that can happen to him. Freedom is first of all freedom from identification. And so here, it's very important that we notice when we're identified. I was watching a documentary last week on Crosby, Stills, and Nash, the musical group that had a big effect on the 70s. They were an important part of my teenage years. And they were talking about how they were in the recording studio in the early 80s. And this was the point where David Crosby had become seriously addicted to crack cocaine. And they were recording an album in the studio, and he had his crack pipe on an amplifier, on a speaker. And it slowly, as they were playing the music, the amplifier, the speaker was shaking, and it slowly moved over and then fell off and smashed. And the group broke up at that moment for quite a few years because David Crosby just got so upset that his pipe broke. He just couldn't stop identifying with it. Road rage. People lose themselves in their anger, or we can become so identified with our anger, particularly outrage and in a sense of injustice. We can become identified with the books that we read I remember, when I was a teenager, in grade 10, I read 250 books. They were all spy detective novels. And I would lose myself completely in the book. I wouldn't want to be, I didn't like myself. I didn't like my life. I was suffering from, a low level of depression. I wasn't aware of it. And I took refuge in books and the complete identification that I had with the hero in the book and losing myself in the book. I became the images and the pictures and what was stimulated by the words in the book. I became so identified with that. And the multiplicity of eyes that Mr. Gurdjieff talks about, the fact that there is no real unity within us at a certain level. We read an article in a magazine that talks about the benefits of fitness. And there's an eye that's in our head brain and that's composed more of our head brain. And that eye reads the article and reads what it does to the heart and how it, strengthens the body and all sorts of things. And so that eye says, tomorrow I'm going to set the alarm and get up at 6 a.m. And that eye is so identified with the idea of exercising that we lose this awareness of ourselves. And then tomorrow at 6 a.m., the alarm rings, and that eye's fast asleep. It's a more physical eye that wakes up, that's tired, and it goes, whoa, and it turns off the alarm clock. And, this is a classic example of how we have different selves within us, and that one self wants to do something and it decides to do something, and then another self comes to the forefront when we do it and it doesn't want to do it. And Mr. Gurdjieff talked about how one self can sign a contract and then all the other selves within us are stuck by that contract. And we've got to stop identifying with these different selves, which we may call moods, we can call negative emotions. You get caught up in anger, and that's actually one of these selves, one of these eyes that we talk about. The only real proper thing to be identified with is myself here in this moment. So to remember ourselves always and everywhere. So books, we get so identified with them. I know that it's been about 10 years now, I stopped watching television shows and movies. And for a while, I actually played a recording in the background that went from sensing and then 18 seconds later to feeling. So I was bringing myself back into my body and trying to bring myself back into my feelings when I was watching TV. And it worked for a good part, but I noticed that I was still on an emotional level, stuck in a real state of identification. I used to like murder mysteries and police shows and dramas, and those actually provoke the anxiety response and fill your body with all sorts of things like adrenaline and norepinephrine and all sorts of chemicals. And I'd be gripping the armrest, and my whole body was in a state of physical identification with what was going on in the screen. And even though I would bring my awareness back, I would lose it between those moments of bringing myself back. And I entered into such a state of physical identification that, I just thought these programs, these shows, what they are really doing at the most basic level is creating and sustaining and nurturing such a state of identification, particularly on the emotional level. And I just finally got to the point where I don't want to give these TV shows, the people who make them, that power over me. I want to be aware of my body. I want to be aware of my breathing. I want to be aware of myself in this environment, to be aware of what I am seeing, what I am hearing, what I'm smelling, the taste in my mouth, the sensations in my body, and what I'm feeling. And identification is our attention being pulled away from us. Rather than ourselves controlling our attention. We've lost control of our attention. And I find it interesting in that quote where Mr. Gurdjieff said that, people think that their zeal, their enthusiasm, their commitment is a noble thing. A lot of, the peace movement, the environmental movement, the Occupy movement, all of those movements are engendering for a lot of people an extreme state of identification. They think they are doing these wonderful things, but it would be better, it would be more important if they could bring their attention back to their body, if they could bring their attention back to their breath, if they could bring their attention back to themselves. The idea of freedom, it's an idea. It doesn't really exist. The idea of Canada is an idea. It doesn't really exist. The idea of money is an idea. It's an illusion. It doesn't really exist. These are all collective hallucinations that we collectively hallucinate and we collectively share. When I was born, I wasn't born with a name. I wasn't born Alan. But my parents named me Alan. And then, oh, come and look at Alan. And this is Alan. And Alan, whoa, little baby Alan. And I begin to identify with my name. I remember the first time I saw my name in print. It was like, wow, my name's in print. That's such identification with something that's not me, that's not real. And so we live in this constant state where our attention is focused on what is not real, and we don't use it to focus on ourselves. So we live, for the most part, in a constant state of identification. And in the next meeting, I'm going to talk about the specific internal and external considering, which are subsections of identification. But the thing that I've noticed as well is I meant to bring my spray bottle, but I don't have it with me. It's in the kitchen. But, it's like the spray bottle, and we can create this spray, and we spray this energy outside, and then we project all of these illusions and delusions on this spray. Or we can turn it around and spray it on ourselves. We can spray it on something that is real. J.G. Bennett said that the energy of hydrogen-48 of the Earth is a very mechanical, automatic, habitual energy. And the energy of the mindful state, mindful awareness, he called sensitive energy. I understand why he called it that, but I completely disagree. I actually think that the mindful energy, hydrogen-24, is the energy of identity. And we can waste this energy through the process of identification, spraying it on things that really are not real, on those novels I read when I was in grade 10, on my name, on my nationality, on ideas, on books, on saving the world, or we can spray it on ourselves. And when we spray it on ourselves and spray it on what is real, this energy of identity then coalesces into the shape of our higher being body. And it's all done through the most precious gift that we have been given, the power of attention. And so when our attention is not focusing on remembering ourselves here in this moment, and that includes the awareness of my body, the awareness of my environment, the awareness of my emotions, when my attention is not here, then it's somewhere else, and I'm sort of using it to prop up, to create the artificial. And that stuff is like sandcastles in the sky. We are not creating anything permanent or anything real. So, as Mr. Gurdjieff said in that quote, the freedom, there are many levels of freedom, but our first step towards freedom is freedom from identification. And this ties back into, what I was talking about, inner work. To bring that energy back into ourselves, to bring our attention, because this is the energy of attention, and to bring that energy back into the awareness of our breath, to bring that energy back into the awareness of our body, to bring that energy back into the awareness of our eyes, receiving all of the light and images and shapes and forms that are coming in through our eyes, to bring it back to our ears and all of the sounds that are coming in through our ears, to bring it back to our sense of smell and the smells that are coming in through our nose, to bring it back to our taste buds. Even in this moment, even though we're not eating, we can become aware of the taste of our mouth, to bring it back to what is real, to use this. Now, in that quote also, another very important thing that Mr. Gurdjieff said is that identification is the enemy of self-remembering. And I was in a Bennett group for 11 months, 2006, 2007, and this was one of the few things that I learned. And I learned it on the first meeting I had with the group leader. He said, you haven't figured out that identification steals hydrogen-24. It works with hydrogen-24. So that energy of mindful awareness that we use, the energy of attention, we can use it to become aware, to identify our body, our breath, our eyes, what's coming in our ears, or we can lose it, we can waste it, we can throw it away into the world. And doing that is like pouring from the empty to the void. Someone has an interest in science in high school. They go to university and they do a couple of years of pre-med, and then they go and get a Bachelor of Science focusing on that. And then they get into medical school, becoming a doctor, and they become a doctor. What that really means is that there are a bunch of people who have invented this program, and they've invented a structure and an organization that gives a stamp of approval, and then they give this piece of paper that you can put on your office saying that you are a doctor. And so these people, and this is one of the problems of the medical profession, is that they really create this identification with the title doctor. I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor. On a real level, they may be a healer. They may be a profound healer. They may have profound healing tools. But their energy, their identity, I become identified with that over and over and over and over. And they think they are that. Everyone around thinks they are that. And then they breathe their last breath and die. If there is part of us that continues, would that part of us that continues take along the medical diploma? And it's not just medicine. There are a couple of professions, 3 big ones that create massive identification. The medical profession, the legal profession, so lawyers and police officers. Police officers are their badge, and it really becomes a sense of who they are. They also do it in the military, but only when you're in the military. They strip away any identity you may have of yourself, and you become a private, you become the uniform and the strips on your shoulders. This misuse of this energy of identity is widespread. Hitler and Goebbels and Goering in fascist Germany learned how to, we dress up in these uniforms and we carry these symbols like Roman legionnaires, and we make the Roman legionnaire salute, and, massively creating this false identity, this misuse of the energy of identification, becoming so identified with symbols and, handshakes and whatever. Those are the most revealing examples of it. But we all live in the state of identification. We think we are our name. We think we are our education. We think we are our nationality, our age, our whatever. When if you become aware of your body, if you become aware of your breath, you'll realize, I'm not a Canadian. Guido's not a Colombian. Ian's not an American. These are labels. These are identifications we put on ourselves, and our passports and our citizenship papers and our birth certificates are elevated to the state where we think they are real, but they're not really real. My breath is real. My body is real. My heartbeat is real. My blood is real. My environment where I am here and now in this moment is real. And we become so identified with our moods. We can get upset at the weather, that it's raining. Someone can inflame our sense of injustice and we yell at them and get mad at them. Identification takes on so many different qualities. We can be identified at the level of our head brain in terms of the images and words and pictures. We can also become identified physically. The whole fashion industry, you become identified rather than sensing yourself. Your, so to speak, sensation of self is in the fashion and the clothes you're wearing and in the look and what you're trying to, what other people see you as, and the hats and the scarves. And so we can become identified at a physical level. It's not the proper form of inward identification. It's the identification of our clothing and our jewelry. And so we can become identified, mentally, physically, and emotionally, our moods. We get stuck in a mood, we're angry or we're sullen or we whatever, and we get in these moods and we can't pull ourselves out of it. That's a state of emotional identification. And Mr. Gurdjieff said that one thing that you can notice about identification, and this is actually the misuse of C12 or sexual energy, which is what sustains and maintains identification. The higher C12 blends with the lower, whatever it is in our physical, mental, or emotional center, and they meet in the middle in that state of identification. So through this misuse of this energy, we become so identified with whatever it is we're doing. And one of the qualities he said that we can notice is there's a certain vehemence to the state. The emotions, the vehemence, the weather, and you're mad at the weather and you're upset at the person who left that thing out on the road that you tripped on and the guy who honks at you and you're waving your hands around, giving people fingers and drivers and whatever. The thing that I've noticed is that beneath this is the ego. There's a sense of me. The fashion, it's me, the ideas, these ideas are important to me, the enthusiasm that he talked about, the zealousness, all of that. Underneath is the ego, or to use his term, the properties of the consequences of the organ Kunda buffer. This malignant part of ourselves. And it's the ego, it's the me, the I, me, mine, that is the real enemy that we have to slay. And this is inherent within all states of identification. When we outwardly identify and lose any kind of true awareness of ourselves. And the ego is what is destroying this planet. It's the ego that, the guy who runs Amazon, Jeff Bezos or whatever his name is worth $163 billion. There's something obscene about that. There's something obscene about our economic model where, 1% or the top 10% control 90% of the wealth. And it's all the ego. It's, I want these numbers. I want all of this. The man occupying the White House, the orange-haired creature, is an embodiment of ego, me. And so the state of identification underneath it is this ego, this malignant thing that is destroying our species and destroying the planet. And therefore, rather than engaging in protest marches, rather than joining Occupy, and it's wonderful, we can do that as long as we learn to do it, but not in a state of identification. When we become so identified with the cause, we've lost ourselves. And when we lose ourselves, underneath it, you'll find the ego, and it may seem like a very good cause. But the first freedom is the freedom from identification. It's bringing that energy of attention back into what is real, into our body, into our breath, into our environment, into what we're feeling in this moment. But, as any act of mindful awareness, as I talked about last week, involves an inward separation to become aware of myself here. That inward separation, to be mindful of my hands, I have to inwardly separate from my hands. When I'm in my hands, when I'm in my body, I'm identified with it. When I begin to step up to this next level, when I focus my attention on remembering myself here in this moment and now, I'm actually separating from those forms of identification. Okay, there I've talked a lot again. Any questions on this?
Listen, I want to say something that maybe helps in a way that the relation I have with people in the last, say, 2 weeks, it's different of what I saw it before. Sometimes I upset people. In the last days, I found that I don't upset them anymore.
Okay.
And and that's because I'm doing this. Maybe I think it's because I'm doing the 60-ball exercise.
Yeah. Well, doing these exercises over and over will focus our attention in the right way. But upsetting people and doing all of that, I'm going to talk about that in the next meeting. I'm going to focus on internal and external considering. They are subsections. They are forms of identification. So when we internally consider, and so somehow in the last few weeks, perhaps through doing your inner exercises and stuff like that, people are not quite so internally considering when they're around you. Perhaps you're somehow bringing it out. And, we will talk about that in the next meeting. That's going to be my focus of the next meeting, that this changes our relationship to people and it changes our relationship to the world around us. Any other questions? I'll get to that. We'll talk about that. That will be a whole meeting in itself. Any other questions? Any other comments? No? Okay, it's almost noon. We can end it a few minutes early. I want to thank you for being here. I don't know, the beep means someone should be joining us. I don't know if it's, Ben's there, but his microphone's turned off and his camera's not on. Hopefully he's listening in the background.
I've actually been listening.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Hey.
I was just been a little busy because I'm on duty right now.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. He's moved into residence at university, and he's he's a student monitor or whatever they call it. So, to get his room, he's got to keep an eye on all the new kids.
Yeah.
So, okay, Ben, I'm going to try and contact you all this week. I've had, like the last few weeks, I haven't really been able to devote much attention to that, but I will try and talk to you all, this week. I'll try and do it earlier in the week because things get towards later in the part of the week I tend to book up. So it's good that you were there, Ben. We saw you there, but we didn't see your image.
Right.
Okay. Take care, everyone. I'll see you all next week. Bye now.
All right. See you.